2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
About microtonal and xenharmonic music. I'm your host, Stephen Weigel, and today our episode features members of the UnTwelve 2019 Xenharmonic Praxis Camp, if I got that name correct.
We have many names.
Xenharmonic Workshop and Showcase.
Yes, Xenharmonic Workshop and Showcase. Thank you very much. So, featured here, we have many members in the room. I think it would be good to start this episode by going around and introducing ourselves.
I'm Thomas Shirk. I first got involved in this scene back in 2013 with one of these events. I'm a violist. I've composed at times. My current interest is in the pragmatics direction as far as figuring out how to connect people and resources, line things up so that more great recordings get made and more scenes like this occur.
I am Chris Bailey, and I am, I guess, a composer by trade, at least in the musical world, and I've been kind of fooling with microtonality since, I don't know, the late 90s, and I've tried a bunch of different tunings in my music. Most recently, I guess I've written a bunch of pieces in 17, but this workshop's official tuning is 31, which I didn't get a chance to experiment with before the workshop, but having played the subset of 31 that's been on the piano here, kind of excited to try a little bit more of that in the future.
Hi, I'm Jacob Barton. I encountered xenharmonics in my senior year of high school, and I caught the bug and I went down the rabbit hole. 2011, I started a summer camp that turned into the event that we stand here today, with the help of many friends and collaborators. I think that face-to-face interaction is a huge, crucial, key element in getting this stuff out of your brain and into your body and into the world. And my contribution, I hope that my contribution is to promote more real-world interaction events, live performing, music meetups, that sort of thing.
Great.
I like 31 equal tones per octave. I like 17 tones equal per octave. I like many flavors of just intonation.
I'm Fortuna from Detroit. Probably the senior member of this group and probably the least prolific of the composers that have been doing it a while. But I've been noodling around off and on with microtones or xenharmonics since, I guess, the early 1980s. And, by trade I'm a piano tuner, so I'm a little bit immersed in that world by default. But so I messed around primarily with equal temperaments. I did a lot of stuff in 7 equal and a little bit in 15 and a little tiny bit in 41, and then more recently I've gotten into just intonation more as I'm exploring the pedal steel guitar, which is an instrument that lends itself to both just intonation, even in its traditional country western music usage, despite that music not being generally in just intonation. But that's not what I play. I just play weird. I just play my own stuff on it. But so it's I'm just continuing to learn and really enjoying these camps that I've been going to for the last 7 or 8 years.
I'm Hans-Gunter Lock. I am based in Estonia in Europe, and I especially came to the camp here for learning more about enharmonic and microtonality. So I can say more or less it came first time in touch when I studied in Hamburg in Germany, and my professors Manfred Stanke and Georg Heidel, they had even contact with the microtonal scene in the US, and they talked a lot about that. I'm a composer. In my lifetime I have decided, or I found that for me the most interesting scale is the Bohlen-Pierce scale. But that doesn't mean that I don't like the others. I haven't yet them explored, but through the workshop here I got through these few days a lot more practical imagination about all the EDO scales. Also I played a violin, and I was here invited to play a lot of pieces and record them. That was a big challenge for me, but I got it, and I'm very glad that I could come to learn more about Enharmonic.
My name is John Jansen. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I'm primarily a composer. I started building instruments a few years ago. That sort of got me interested in microtonal music as well. I mostly work in different just intonation tunings, in large, kind of inspired by the harmonic series music of Glenn Branca.
I'm Ashkan Tabatawi. Currently working on my 5th year in my PhD in composition. So basically, the way I started thinking about microtonal music and the concept of UnTwelve was, I think, from the beginning of childhood, because I grew up in Iran, and the traditional Persian music is basically UnTwelve by nature. And so I grew up with this dichotomy between temperament and non-temperament, if you can call it that way. But for now, my main interest is finding a way to connect rhythm in music with pitch. And I think the only way I can actually do that is to explore microtonality a little bit more.
I am Nick Osborn. I am primarily a composer. I am currently about to go into my 2nd year of my master's degree in composition. As far as microtonality goes, I'm mostly more new to this concept. I was kind of introduced to the idea of this workshop through social media platforms. I was part of a group, and they just it looked interesting to me, and I also kind of partially felt guilted that I hadn't really been to very many workshops, and I've been seeing all these emails about all kinds of different workshops, and so I was like, I'll just go to this workshop and kind of see what it's about and kind of explore something new. So I wrote a piece for this workshop. This is my first microtonal piece, so I kind of, as the workshop is about 31 EDO, I thought I might as well jump in with 31 EDO, and it's been quite an experience to work with some of the people from this workshop in terms of writing it, and while we've been here to record it. So,
Nick, if this is one of your first musical workshops, I think I should warn you that most of them are not like this.
That's a good point.
There's definitely something very special and unique about Xen Camp. Something about microtones and being in the woods just belongs together. Oh, sorry. My name is Ari Fikowski. This is my first year here, and actually my first experience as a Enharmonic performer. I'm a classically trained cellist, and I have been for 15 years. I have a studio of my own, employees and everything I did up until now was very 12-y, which is a word I'm trying to get to catch on. And I'm really happy to be here. I guess my main interest is in facilitating rehearsals, facilitating interpersonal smoothness, and making sure the logistics are sound. I also like to cook.
Hey, I'm Gareth, Hearne. I'm currently speaking an American accent, but I'm Australian, and maybe you'll hear my Australian accent come back during this sentence. That's been happening. So yeah, I'm a late-stage PhD student, and my research is in music cognition, particularly in microtonal tuning systems to do with tonality. I really like harmony, and I like Xen harmony particularly. I'm also really involved with the barbershop harmony community internationally. And I play clarinet and saxophone, and I sing. And I got interested in the old Xen harmonics when I was 14, and I learned about the harmonic series. And I was super interested in maths and patterns and also in music, and I was like, oh, that's both of those things at the same time. So I've just been researching that since then, so that's 13 years now. Doing the microtones, doing some music theory, and eventually going into things like this so that I actually end up not just writing about music, but also writing music and playing microtonal music as well.
Hi, I'm Vito Cicarella, and I've been interested in microtonal music for about 10 years now. I got an interest in math late in high school, and I eventually stumbled upon just intonation, and I think Gareth and I were talking about this earlier today. There was a link on the Wikipedia page for just intonation to the Bohlen-Pierce scale. So that was one of my first introductions to Xen harmonic music, and that was just something that I when I heard some musical examples. I had heard nothing like that before, and I was immediately hooked. So yeah, I've been exploring microtonality since then, and I aim to release a lot of music in my life that is Xen harmonic, and I have a lot of ideas that I've worked with, but I have a hard time finishing things. But that's kind of a good thing, because I kind of have a lot of pieces to stitch together. So I might come out with a lot of material in a shorter amount of time if I ever get around to doing that. But anyway, right now I'm actually focusing on developing some software that will make it easier to, I hope that it will make microtonal music easier to explore and compose with in an electronic setting, and also I hope that it will help educate people about different harmonic systems, and also just open the door for people who aren't even aware of it.
Hi, my name's Douglas Blumeyer, and I'm a composer and software engineer from San Francisco. I consider myself a hobbyist, I guess, because it's not my, it's my side hustle. But I've been writing music since I was a little kid, but I didn't start incorporating xenharmonics and microtones, etc., until like 2007, so I guess like 12 years ago. I remember it was when I heard a piece by Georg Friedrich Haas, and then just went on kind of a Wikipedia rampage, and then when I discovered Bohlen-Pierce, the whole thing was just cracked open, and there was no coming back. Well, what I'm working on now is I'm back in San Francisco. I'm a resident in this incubator program at a place called the Gray Area Foundation, and they work at the intersection of art and technology. And I guess one way to put what I'm trying to achieve there is to recreate a sensation I experienced the first time I came to the Xenharmonic camp back in 2011. I was in this very room when we arranged everyone, holding hands with each other in a human JI lattice. And it really helped me feel that musical realm. And so I'm actually going to use virtual reality to let people spatialize harmony and experience it in a new way.
Can we make the real thing again, too?
We should. Yeah, we should do that.
Really wonderful.
And then I just favorite scales. That was one of the questions, right?
Sure. Or what kinds of tunings do you like to work in?
Well, weird ones. I usually like to work with ones that I come up with myself. Probably my favorite one is inspired by Bohlen-Pierce, where it cuts out the 2. I cut out the 2, the 3, the 5, and the 7. So I have an 11 minimum.
So almost nothing's left.
Well, it uses 11, 13, 17, and 19.
Cool.
And it actually works out pretty nice.
Yeah. Is that where the Blumeyer comma comes from?
It is indeed. Yeah. Blumeyer comma is 1/11th, 1/13th, and 1/17th over a 19th is 2, 3, 4, 2 over 2, 3, 4, 1. So it's
sounds right.
Teeny tiny comma.
Yeah, there you go. Very tiny. Cool. Awesome. So now that we're all here and we're gathered, my first sort of prompt has to do with how theory affects practice. What have you learned by coming to this camp? Have your theories of just intonation or equal temperament had an impact on your playing? Do you feel like theory helps you? Do you feel like it's a hindrance? Do you feel like it's unrelated?
My first temptation is to say that it's unrelated. The way I experience most music making is on an intuitive level. I enjoy theory. I love to sit at a good theory talk and have someone that's knowledgeable explain things to me on paper, but that mode of thinking is too slow for me to do anything in the real world. Mm-hmm. Everything that I've done in the real world in this scene is intuition powered to some extent. Being here and taking in these theory talks and experiencing just going way farther into the world of theory than I do on my own, reminds me that what it's done in this scene in particular is let us know there was so much more to do. It was theory and practice working together in this never-ending spiral, there's a good Xenharmonic analogy.
This magic spiral.
Informing each other and egging each other on that caused us to know we needed to do this and caused us to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like our energy, like microtonal energy, kind of feeds off itself really strongly because we all sort of know how deeply important this subject is. I mean, that's sort of why I got into it initially in 2015, was because I figured out that like so few people were playing this kind of music, but it was also really, really important. So yeah, I mean, we had a lot of different pieces that use different equal temperaments here, other than 31. What do you guys think are some of the advantages or disadvantages of creating like one tuning for the camp. Has that been something we've done since 2011?
I think it's been a great advantage as a newer player because it helps you get used to one set of physical movements at a time. 31 on a strings instrument or on a sliding trombone, for example, would be a bunch of super tiny steps. Mm-hmm. So, that action in itself is something that will only be solidified by repetition. Mm-hmm. So I think that focusing on the one tuning, rather than spreading us out and asking us to develop 5 separate techniques of playing our instrument, was a really good decision, and I think we should repeat it.
Yeah, and 31 is a nice tuning for that since it can be notated like 12-tone equal temperament. I wonder if we would feel similarly if our tuning of choice was very difficult to work with, or unpopular, like 20, or something like that.
Ew.
20.
One thing I'll point out about the tuning focus from a pragmatic perspective is it prompted some discussions, it prompted some pieces, but it was hardly like stuck to.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing, but it does somewhat blunt the advantage of trying to circle resources around something. It's an interesting balance to try to strike. We try to do it each year, varying results.
Yeah. Was Bohlen-Pierce ever the tuning? Because it seems like a lot of us have certainly been inspired by Bohlen-Pierce. Vito and Doug in their introductions, Hans, everything he does, and me just like recently, I've been trying to write like everything I do in Bohlen-Pierce lately, because I really want to...
I feel like it was the lieutenant tuning this session.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of talking.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hans, had his presentation on it, and so it's...
Yeah, and just to add, like when I was talking to Vito before, like that's also what originally inspired me from the Just Intonation. It was on Wikipedia. It was Bohlen-Pierce, that same link. That I was like, oh, that's different. Oh, okay. And then the rest of the temperaments that had octaves, I was like, what's the point? They still got octaves. And then I figured out what the point was.
Right. You gotta cherish those octaves.
I have sort of a follow-up question to composers that are kind of somewhat just out of the sort of normie academic composing arena, as I was. So what is your, I don't know, lessons learned or impressions or sort of coming from that perspective? Do you feel like your composition will be changed forever, or do you think you'll probably go home and be like, well, that was interesting, but...
I don't know. Like, probably a little of both. Like, I can see definitely the certain advantages that are given by these different temperaments to like more, for instance, more closely approximate the just intervals. And so maybe I could take those home and use those with my own composition. Maybe to simplify it a little bit, one thing that I did find when I was working with these higher order temperaments is just that you have so like exponentially more possibility with just simply as a factor of how many notes you add to the scale. And then if you're not thinking about that consciously, you can very quickly create something that gives performance a nightmare. And so I kind of tried to limit myself in this piece. Like I wasn't really thinking of like an MOS or anything. I was just thinking of a few select harmonies, and so I just ended up like taking like an 11-note subset. But I think going forward, like a piece that I do in the future, I might be able to take like a smaller just MOS set of maybe a temperament and just make that easier to work with performers and to see where I can go with that.
I find the notate when 31 is notated with quarter tones, I find it hard to read still.
It's not ideal.
I didn't get enough practice doing it this camp. Like it could be more immersive, like just practicing it every day, looking at it to make it better. But like reading Daniel's round. It's hard to look at because these things are designed to notate quarter tones.
Especially because it is, it's approximated, because it's not 24 EDL.
Right. It's like the system is compatible, but it wasn't really designed to do what it was. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of a microcosm of a larger problem with all of this, is that we're kind of super using a lot of technologies and instruments and tools. We're stretching them beyond their ability. And it puts duress upon us, the performers and the composers and the technologists. And often, just more often in the microtonal world, seemingly, than maybe in the broader musical world, we're asked to play multiple roles, wear different hats at the same time, and that can take a toll.
Yeah. Although it's certainly very exciting.
It's exciting to wear more than one hat.
That's where things like that.
I have more than one.
So, just out of curiosity, so maybe this would be way out there, but would you propose for like different scales and like different number, like different EDOs and whatnot, that they should have like a unique system of notation that doesn't like draw
I think
so closely from these 12 EDO
It
things?
has to come out of the practice of people. So it's like, let's get, 131 equal pieces and get really good at them and figure out then how we want to see them notated.
131 don't equal temperament?
No, 100 pieces. And 30.
Oh, 131 tone.
Right.
We're good at math here.
I thought you were just saying 131. I have to say that when
pieces that are equal to each other.
I think of this as we're seeding a canon. Like, it becomes a quote mainstream of this particular school of microtonality that we find ourselves a part of.
One thing that's very interesting about this whole kind of discussion is how many different sort of schools of thought arise from chasing microtonality in a certain direction. For example, Nick mentioned how he wasn't really using an MOS, but that he might next time. And I think I've noticed this in a lot of composers, including myself, where when we become conscious of the MOS theory, we sort of try and engage it a little bit more. I think almost everyone I've seen who writes microtones that aren't in quarter tones that hasn't learned that yet has written with extremely irregular scales, much to my delight at trying to find out.
What do you mean by irregular?
Well, irregular just meaning that there are many different kinds of step sizes. And perhaps no clear pattern, although a lot of the scales and modes that I've seen used fill up the octave quite nicely. So usually they're not angular or anything, like an enharmonic scale, like the Greek enharmonic scale. I don't know if we've heard of that, but it's basically like 2 quarter tones in a row, and then jumps up to a perfect fourth, and then does that again on the perfect fifth.
Myself, like, I sort of agree about the notation thing because I often anchor when I'm composing. I anchor to familiar things and then sort of go off. So, like, if I'm writing in 17, I'll have maybe at some point there'll be a C major triad, and then I'll put like a G sharp on top of that. So it's like this weird added 6, and then I'll try like an A flat, which is another version of that weird added 6. So I'm thinking about things that I'm familiar with, but I'm kind of putting like weird tweaks on them that are only possible in a different tuning system than 12. So I guess I probably shouldn't admit this, but I'm still kind of thinking in 12 a little bit, but just sort of going against that. I mean,
UnTwelve?
Another example is an older piece of mine called Balladei with piano. It was for piano and 2 kind of electronics fixed media ensembles, one in 17 and the other in 29. And one of the ways that I structured that piece is as I would have a sort of pre-planned string of pitches that I wanted to bring out on the surface of the piece. So like, let's say it was G flat, D flat, B flat. And like when the G flat was the pitch that I wanted to bring out on the surface, you'd hear like F sharp, G flat, you'd hear F double sharp, which in 29 is like a different tone from G, I think. And so I would have this like class, you know, I would kind of be thinking in 12 a little bit, but writing music that, you know, was, you know, ends up sounding totally non-12, but I kind of use what I was familiar with as a basis to move into the new tuning, rather than starting with something that's totally unfamiliar to my ears and or the ears of anybody who might be trying to play it.
I want to add, of course, that is the big question of notation and scoraturas and things like that. Of course, I could not say that the quarter accidentals disturbed me in learning the 31 EDO playing on the violin. But it might be the truth that I have never played real quarter tone pieces before, so that I immediately assigned that, okay, this quarter tone signs in 31 EDO means that, and not that what is in 24 EDO.
Small comment on the issue with using quarter tones in 31. The use of quarter tones in 31 is analogous to the use of regular sharps and flats in 31. And quarter tones mean the same thing to regular sharps and flats in 31 that they do in 24. So why is it that regular sharps and flats are no problem in approaching composition in 31, but quarter tones are? I'm wondering if anyone could answer that.
What? So, quiz time. What's the interval D F flat to F sesquisharp?
Is that a perfect fifth plus 1 out of 31?
No.
Well, that's
17?
B what? B flat to F. That's just a perfect fifth, right?
No.
Michael's first answer to have been wrong tells us all we need.
Like, why would you write that interval?
When you're trying to compute an interval and you see an accidental on a lower note, accidental on the higher note, and they're pointing in opposite directions, that might be my chief complaint.
This is why, like,
I think that's to do with quarter tones. Necessarily.
It's complicated by any microtone.
I mean, I think it has to do with our unfamiliarity with the system. Like, it took me so long. I don't know if we know this about quarter tones, but after like 2 years with quarter tones, I finally learned to see like B half flat and F half sharp as being a perfect fifth.
Yeah, right.
Because like that's so, like you're just trained with 12-tone equal temperament. If you see flats and sharps, you're like, oh, that can't be a perfect fifth. But in quarter tones, you have these interesting in-between situations, and 31 to me seems like an extension of that, where if you were theoretically used to all 31 keys and how they worked, you might not have this issue. And of course, there's also the method that perhaps Easley Blackwood would use.
Wait, but in 31, isn't it true that in 31 you can always spell a fifth so that it looks like a fifth?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's special. Can you do that with any tune? Even if it looks really
you
horrendous?
can do it with any tuning, but can you do it with any notation? Can you do it with the notation style in 31?
Right, yeah, no, you couldn't do it with any notation.
You can. It's just tricky in my example because starting from B to F, it starts off as a diminished fifth, so then you're like, well, which way do you go? When we have guide tracks and we have like these different technological helps, notation becomes less of a deal.
Yeah, but I think the main problem with it is that we're still, everything about music that we do is based on 7 notes. And like having 31 steps, all of a sudden is too far away from 7. And then, so I would say like if we want to just do 31, anything more than that, we should think differently about 7 notes. We should use the lines in different ways, like maybe use I don't know, 31 lines.
Like unequally spaced lines? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that makes it, but again, like training musicians to see music that way, it's not practical as well, you know?
This is a huge point from the project I did on pragmatics, that different use group, and this is from human factors engineering, different user groups have very, very different needs. Probably the same system can't serve all of them. It's a mistake to even try. And we heavily speak in this room for the composer-analyst set rather than the performer set.
I would say leave the composer the right to compose in a notation that works for their compositional mindset, and then perhaps add a role of like interpreter who's trying to help or realize.
And technology could make this fast too, as far as a composer can compose in whatever system they're comfortable with, and in a faster, more automated way, transition parts or other tools to different forms.
Yeah, Hans, you have an app that does that, right? A patch on Macs.
Yeah, I have a patch. I write Bohlen-Pierce in I name it synthesizer transcription. That means the A4 is nailed, A4 is 440 hertz or 442 as you agree, and then because the Bohlen-Pierce step is larger than semitone and 146.3, if I play chromatically it goes faster higher and faster lower. I have learned where the intervals are, how I can play the Bohlen-Pierce chords. So it is a simple tool with regular Halberstadt keyboard that everybody can have.
I've heard comments about how Hans notates Bohlen-Pierce using quarter tones to be intuitive, and yet about 31 EDO, which is supposed to be all diatonic, we hear that the quarter tones might not be that easy to read. There's sort of two schools of thought, I think, on notation, and we sort of fall under one school, which is where if we have a different tuning system, we theoretically notate every different tuning system a different way. And we assume that there are like sort of a finite number that people would want to explore maybe. And on the other end of the coin, say with like the Boston Microtonal Society, Dolores Catharino, they want a big system with lots of notes that can explain any mode. So it's kind of interesting that I think we sort of really have two ways of going about that, and when we go about the first way, we tend to sort of agree on different kinds of accidentals. But I was intrigued by how Gareth's piece uses no non-standard accidentals, but is still notated with like a microtonal key signature.
Yeah, I mean to talk on that. That was because I didn't have enough time to change them on musical to non-standard accidentals. So that was just an example.
Sanctus, 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 Dominus, Sanctus, 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 Dominus, Deus, Deus, Sabaoth, Deus, Deus, Sabaoth, Levy succede terra, gloria tua, Levy succede terra, gloria tua, Hosanna, in excelsis, Hosanna, in excelsis.
What follows is Gareth's explanation of the porcupine scale, which is a temperament, and when it's used as a mode, it often has 7, 8, or 15 notes. And the mode that Gareth is explaining is the mode with 7 notes, and how he notates it.
It still works though, right? I mean, I only have one
I
accidental.
almost thought it worked better.
And I explained it. Well, that's interesting. And we did talk about that. No, we didn't. But so I only used one accidental in the Sanctus, which is the only movement I used that had a key signature.
What was the key signature?
The key signature was, well, what it should have been was in order to play in D bright major. I needed to, assuming the convention, which I want to establish on this podcast because it's not that well established, having G to A being the large step in the staff notation. I think I read it somewhere that that's the way that Mike does it, so I do it that way as well, so everyone should. It was meant to be an E, like the key signature is meant to be G up, F up, E up.
Yeah.
In order to bring that large step between the D and the E up. But I couldn't get the ups on new score in time, so they became sharps. The problem with using sharps, I would say, for that completely non-standard staff, is because a sharp is what happens when you like raise a note by a chromatic semitone in a diatonic system.
Right.
It's very much associated with that, and I don't really like the idea of using it for something completely different, so I just use a standard difference symbol for that. So I would use an up, however a sharp looks better than an up, and maybe it's like more familiar. So if my key signature didn't confuse anyone, and you said you liked it better, then yeah, maybe that's still fine. But while I have the floor, I won't keep it for too long, but I have one more thing to say. You were saying that we have a different notation for each tuning, but I think
sort of.
Yeah, so like because we don't quite have that. You know, what we have is different tunings for different things as opposed to different tunings for different scales, different tunings along with different scales as opposed to one tuning that does everything. That's the difference between us and the Boston Microtonal Society and Catherine Dolores. Is it Dolores? Anyway, whereas sagittal notation is a notation system that does notate every different tuning system the same way.
Well, yes.
So that's
each different tuning system differently.
Yeah, but also the same, right?
Using the same
thing. Like we have the same notation that applies to each tuning. Yeah, it's a different way of writing it, I suppose. The same notation that applies to each tuning system, each scale, each possible. And so I feel like that's like something that's cool about that, because even though we do have like different tuning systems, we notate them all using the same logic.
You want to show the similarity in logic between, say, a sharp in 17 equal and a sharp in 41 equal, but you want to respect the difference also. And I was just thinking, like, could we like do it with the vowel of sharp? Like we've got shorps and sharps.
I'm such a
That would be just like the wacky solfege.
I will die on that hill.
The private vowels for the wider sharps. So like in 26, it's like a.
Yeah, because it's very small.
Well, that's like a kites, a little bit like kites.
Ups and downs?
Yeah, it's now I forgot. I was on the Enharmonic Adventures Festival last year. He gave a little paper about it, but it was he had colors, and then he has like these weird syllables that he uses to symbolize going up and down in different limits and that kind of thing.
It was so funny how fast he was flying through that presentation. He was proceeding at about 4 times the normal rate, and he had so many diagrams, but I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like the kind of thing that if you spent a semester learning it, it would actually be really good, but
yeah,
1 hour was probably not sufficient.
I was going to say that I love the concept behind sagittal, and it makes all the sense, and it's definitely what we should be doing. But I would also say that the way that the information is presented is not super accessible to somebody who's new to it, because the way that the symbols are introduced, it's not by, cent size or anything like that. They kind of all have their ratio names, and ratios in themselves are very confusing for newbies.
Yeah, that's a crucial point of information, is that we have one set of needs as a group of people who steep ourselves pretty voluntarily in these things. If we want to be a community that grows and that welcomes and that includes, there's a lot of tension in the systems we use, the tools we use. Ari just hit the nail on the head.
There's a big gap in what I call xenagogy. We need to find a better way, basically just a better way of presenting information in a more accessible way before proceeding into the extreme explanation of every last detail, so that people can get going with playing it.
I think one thing I was talking about with Jacob earlier was in future camps, like the past few camps we've had, presentation sessions, and they kind of vary all over the map from beginner to super advanced, and I think it'd be good in future years to actually kind of label them as to their level and maybe encourage maybe even have a whole module of beginner level
Perhaps a
things to
microtonal.
explain all these basic concepts. So that way, because every year we get people who have never really been introduced to all the theory, and then we
Scale
also
would really help with that. Come to next year's event.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Come
Everybody.
to Enharmonic
Yeah, and that will-
workshop. But
and
then
we
that,
also
that
want to
begs
make-
the question, though: what are the parameters of a microtonal grade system?
Grade system?
Yes, in classical music, we have musical grades that mark the difficulty of a piece. You have grade 1 through 7. 7 being a professional.
Well,
piece, grade
I
one
was
being
advocating that
beginner.
we just start with beginner and advanced, and then we can.
But then
get,
how do you
I think it goes
define
from
those
one.
categories?
It goes from 1-1 to 2/1.
Well, we.
Body gradation.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd
But I'm
start,
just saying
we'd start
something
very
that's
simply and
for example,
very
for me, a string player, Bohlen-Pierce is like it's kind of like it's super intuitive. It's fine. The fingerings are fine. But I have no idea what the BP clarinet is going through, right? Like I have no idea what kind of insane math they're doing in their head.
Nothing, because it's got to
Oh, nice.
press the notes.
Yeah. It's just like every fingering is like another open string.
But what I'm saying is that the idiom for each instrument is different, and you can't really label an entire tuning system as easy, or even an entire piece as easy or hard if there's certain instrumentation with clashing interests or
I wasn't even.
requirements.
Well, that's interesting because I wasn't even thinking of the. I was talking about the presentation section of the camp, but I think that's another issue is the performance.
I think even in the level for playing Bohlen-Pierce on bow string, there is a different level. My piece used only the pictures what you can produce in the first position, and there it's super easy. Nick's piece, what is 31 EDO, and also the highest regions he used. And first I was thinking, oh my god, how I can do that? And
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, getting back to your point, Ari, with the kind of the standard grading chart that we have for the more standard music, would you think that it would be a good idea for maybe, as a collective, maybe for us to come up
I'm
with...
saying that it would be difficult unless you are writing for the same exact instrument however many times.
So,
That's what I mean.
well, I mean...
It's so much easier to adjust a voice, for example, than it is to adjust my finger on a cello. I can do much more extreme things with my voice than I could immediately on my instrument.
But you have somewhere to put your hands on the cello, right?
Yeah, the finger
Voice is
grip.
entirely oral.
Yes,
But you're right.
there's a physical
There's
aspect.
different things about the different instruments, but this whole conversation started through a misinterpretation of another point anyway. So.
I think I wanted to talk about something here that I think is really important to think about now that we're writing microtonal music. Is that, like, for example, when you were talking, Gareth, about moments of symmetry and mods, all this, like we think about, okay, we get to a place that we only have two intervals in a scale, and that's that makes it interesting in a way that is more comprehensible or whatever, coherent.
Yeah.
But then if in our performance of music we can't really achieve that, right? Then it's not gonna happen, you know. It's that, like, what in temper system, whatever it is, musicians are trained enough that they can maybe achieve that,
Pull something off.
yeah, and then that could create some sort of effect that we perceive as human beings of excellency in a way that we cherish in art, right? But I just can't see how, like with any other tuning system, we can get to that point that we can say, all right, now we got it, and that's perfectly performable at that level. Because before that happens, honestly, none of those theories that we're talking about is going to be important, you know, as far as the audience perspective, let's say.
Why? But you just sang in Gareth's piece last night, which was not in 12, and you were able to. I mean, everybody here is at different skill levels of vocal skill. Obviously, was able to pull off a
a decent performance of that.
Yeah, with like.
So doesn't that disprove your point? I mean,
I didn't say that. I think we performed something, but I'm not sure if what we performed and the sound that we heard at the end was exactly what you wanted. With the effect that you wanted to get with that scale that you were talking about. It had a lot of musical moments that were great, but I'm saying, if you wanted to just like maybe grade the performance of what you wanted to, from 0 to 10,
I
what
don't
would you
want to
give?
grade that, but I will say something better. I mean, like,
just give us
no,
a
I'm not
number.
going to give you a rating. But what you did do, like you said, you don't know if you tuned it the way. No, you were all tuning it the right way.
Okay.
Because you heard the scale in the audio examples, and you heard the logic behind the step sizes that maybe you can't exactly reproduce.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the audience can't even hear that there are 6 small steps and 1 large step in the scale.
Yeah.
But people can sing chords in tune if they've got some sort of ear. That makes my pieces easier to do, right? Because it's just chords. It's just chords, and you tune them. And so you use the scale to get approximately there. You hear the example, you sing the scale, you tune the chords. The result. If my piece was in 12 equal, we would be no worse at that. I think with these group of singers.
I think my point
I
is,
agree.
it takes more work to do what we're doing. Like it takes an extra level of.
Yeah.
And so if we're neglecting the other aspects of music, rhythm, what else? Help me out here. Like things that we're focusing all on intonation and then my tuning it right.
And the expression and the musicality can be difficult if you are bogged down in technical shenanigans.
And I think that with Gareth specifically, I think.
Are you saying that you as in singing it, you were basically singing it in 12
phrasing,
or you're just kind of slipping into 12, and that's how?
And it was, and to be honest, it was pretty similar to 12 in general. Like it's not one of those.
One of the movements was very Zen.
No, I'm not saying. I'm not against. By the way, I'm writing like music, right? So I'm here.
So how is it similar to 12? I mean, the Understay was similar to 12 because the score you had was written in 12, and you can do Fajara in 12 as well. So like, yeah, fair enough with that piece. But the Sanctus is just like that's just not 12.
Well, some years with this, they would just go, I don't hear anything Zen.
Yeah,
I'd be like, well, but just listen
Let me put it this way. Maybe your piece. I didn't say anything against your piece.
Oh no, I
mean,
understand.
yeah, but what I'm saying is, I think maybe your piece was a successful, say, experience of writing microtonal music. But then my point is, as a community, how can we actually get to that point that we can get that excellency, that people perform this music over and over, and then we sort of get to the, in this community, we get to the place that people go to the concerts and listen to microtonal music that is confident.
So Ashkan,
that's a big deal for me. Like confident. Like we know that everything there is right. Even in real 12 for equal temperament tuning system, we don't get that. We don't get there. Even if you go to the performance of a really professional symphony orchestra, you still hear. But those moments are pretty salient, right? Even if you go to, for example, the Berlin Philharmonic orchestra performance, those moments that, for example, Hearne is out of tune, everybody gets it, But in a lot of xenharmonic concerts, we get a lot of those moments. To be honest, do you agree or not? That's part of the reality.
What's the sample size of xenharmonic concerts?
Ashkan, I feel like you're talking about two variables at once. So are you saying we need more audience participation, or that the music needs to be performed more accurately?
I think I'm thinking about both at the same time. How to sort of get there.
I think you're also talking about a third thing, which is a piece effectively written in a tuning for the instruments that it's written for, so that it doesn't. Like I think I was talking about this with Stephen the other day. Are there pieces that
Zen pieces that just sound out of tune versus Zen pieces where you think, yeah, this is weird, but it's right. I can tell it's right. And for me, that's what I've become more interested in that.
I call that native.
Well, and I think Stephen was saying, well, people just everybody thinks Zen music sounds out of tune, but I think there is a difference. I think
there's a difference too.
Right, but I think even people who aren't like obsessed with this stuff like we are, can tell the difference between a piece that sounds like, oh, that's out of tune versus that's weird, but I can tell it's supposed to be weird.
What's also interesting is that MOS scales are kind of a good way, I think, for us to think about new modes, especially with how if we have any given mode and we're trying to think of all of the notes in it, we probably don't really want to use very many notes so that we can think of all of them. So that's probably definitely a reason why Gareth Sanctus works out so well, and actually I even argued that Kyrie worked out really well too.
Kyrie, 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 Kyrie,
working in a simple mode. So I think as long as we can think of things in bite-sized chunks and ear training, that people can train up to any mode with just a little bit of time.
I think that's the core of it. I think the core of it, doing anything well, is to have a pedagogy and a method that is reasonable, because playing an instrument is a physical act, and it's going to require a system that makes sense. You cannot simply ask something of a performer but give them no cultural context as to how to do it.
Right. For those of you who feel relatively new to microtonality or xenharmonics in general, maybe you don't even feel new to it, but you want to improve on things, how do you think that we as UnTwelve can do a better job explaining some of the core concepts behind things like regular temperament theory? Or microtonal tuning systems in general?
Well, because there are multiple learning styles, I think there are a lot of different answers, but one thing I would think would be helpful would be a workbook in order to get through the mathematical aspects better with written explanations that are simple to follow.
Exercises.
Hans, I feel like you also have some.
Every time I was thinking, when I have learned that before, all this more or less through Googling and searching in the internet and reading that what is in the internet available. And there's of course a lot of very specialized information at the first glance, I think, on the Enharmonic wiki. And of course I grasped some things from there, but it is too specialized, and I was searching for some textbook. It could be even on university level, but something was systematically described. Of course, Pagera and all these fancy names, or porcupine, and how it is related. Of course, a wiki system is very good to store information, but you cannot get the overall image.
It's totally different to learn xenharmonics by yourself than it is to learn it with a community. Yeah. Because largely the practice of xenharmonics is greatly improved by live events and live conversation, which is why I think that Jacob's whole mantra is so important. Because so much of music making in the classical sense is so obviously about community. Sometimes xenharmonicists seem to approach it from an isolated route. But I really don't think that's the way. You can't tune a chord by yourself.
You can't tune a chord.
Speaking of tuning chords, Christopher Bailey can describe what a day at UnTwelve is like, from beginning to end. What do you do first in the morning?
Well, here at the workshop this year, we're based at Gesundheit, and so we all
Rose at the crack of dawn.
some of us did, yes, and we'll have random conversations, interactions, collaborations, working on new pieces. There was actually a lot of composing that I saw happening, like on the site here. I think several people wrote like 4 or 5 pieces while they were here, which is insanely productive for anybody, really. But anyway, then we have like breakfast kind of at random, and the first couple of days we did presentations where, which were kind of mostly, well, no, I wouldn't say mostly theory-based, but everything from Vito talked about his software, Thomas talked about the issues of practicality and getting good performances and how to make that happen in the xenharmonic world that he alluded to earlier. And then there were more kind of a little bit more theoretical discussions from Hans and Doug Bohlen-Pierce and so on. And so that was the first couple of days, and then we had our recording days where people had written pieces, and we all came up here to the Art Center, and there was a lot of rehearsing and then recording those pieces. We tried a lot of different approaches to recording those pieces. Some pieces were recorded line by line, separate lines, with guide tracks. Pieces were performed listening to all the guide tracks at once as an ensemble.
Nature's screen is old, her heart is due to hold, early leaves of love, but only so an hour, then leaves subsides to leave, so Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down today. Nothing gold can say. Nature's first green is gold, her heart is true to
guide track. And so we tried a lot of different approaches to it. Then we have, lunch and dinner and cleanup and all that stuff. We all help clean things up here at Gesundheit, which may or may not be the location of the camp in future years, but we'll see about that. Then of course in the evening we typically do some sort of group improvisation sessions, and this year those were facilitated by our special guest Elizabeth A. Baker, who also gave a talk on entrepreneurship and I think gave some individual advice to people on that issue, and then also helped us learn about improvisation and performance in general.
The blind fishes of the mud caves navigate their surroundings using electrical frequencies. When two of them draw near each other in the infinite darkness, they instinctually adjust their frequencies so that they don't interfere with each other and can continue to perceive their environment.
So Jacob, why don't you start us off with this piano, generously retuned by Clem, the man.
It's not my best work, so.
Clem did a great job on an aging piano.
Well,
Yes, he
it's
did.
not the aging piano, it's the fact that I spent 15 or 20 minutes to radically change the tuning. It's less time than I would spend.
Wow.
For me to
It's
tune
been
the piano
15 and
level.
20 minutes? What took you so long?
Yeah.
It should have been 5.
And I want to reiterate one of my older mantras, which is that like a tuning doesn't have a sound; it's only what you play with it, and that's so it's
Yes.
interface. But
Yes.
whatever I play is going to give you a totally different idea. So I have no idea what to play to show you what this tuning is, except maybe this chord. No, don't think of no.
Play it one
I thought that was a big chord.
We've got ourselves a chain of super major thirds, but I can't find them. What's
Yeah, let's see. Try like G and
Just play.
I guess.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah. I have some near
Just
just
play the chromatic scale. Just play the chromatic scale.
Yeah.
I can't.
Hear how uneven it is. The two of the adjacent steps on the piano are major seconds. So the way it's tuned, we have a major second in between C and D. We also have a major second.
C sharp.
Yes, I'm talking about the pitches we hear and not what I'm playing on the piano. So like it looks like I'm playing C sharp right now if we were in the room and looking at it. But what we're hearing is C D intoned in 31 tone equal temperament. We also have a whole step in between our apparent E flat and E. And in 31, that's notated E half flat, F half sharp. We get a few just chords out of the arrangement. We get some just 9/7s and some kind of tonal chords. Yeah. So yeah, and play the 11th partial. Yeah. In fact, I think the only chord where we almost get the full like harmonic series is this otonal chord on C, but we don't get the major third in it.
No fives.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get to have those. Okay, cool. So that's our microtonal piano. I played one song with it, so. Some people fall into it by style. Some people fall into it by chance. It's only 1,000 more miles away to success, they say. Just through hobnob smiles, it's cold, calculated strategy that's working all the while. Hopefully somebody else did too.
And a trombone.
Yeah, here's a trombone. Very microtonal. Great. Over here, Vito has a guitar.
This guitar is in 16 equal divisions of the octave. I got this back in February. It was modded by Ron Sword. He does really great work on guitars. And if I can indulge in explaining my favorite chord here.
Indulge!
This tuning has really nice harmonic sevenths.
Yeah.
Let me play it.
Wow, there's like a pleasant shimmering like with piano lines.
Yeah, let me. We don't use it.
Tremolo down.
Xenharmonics.
Yeah, that would be cheating.
And so, although the fifths are pretty flat, they're 25 cents flat. And the third compared to 12 VDO, the major third compared to 12 VDO is pretty far. It's actually closer to a pure major third.
But in the opposite direction.
Yeah, it's 9 cents flat, I think.
But yeah, the 16s is 375 cents. And the just major third is 386.
So the third and the seventh ring really nicely together in this tuning. That's wrong. This one. And I like adding this 8/7 9.
How are the strings tuned in relation to each other?
So I have them tuned in sharp fourths. They're 5/25 cent fourths, and it's just a straight, fourths on every string.
So in ups and downs, that could be written as E, A up, D double up, I guess G triple up. Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Well, 16 there you go.
I guess the way that I tune it, I use A440 on the A string, what is normally the A string on a standard guitar. And then the E is 25 cents flat, the D is 25 cents sharp, the G is a half sharp, so halfway between G and G sharp. C sharp, 25 cents flat, and then in F sharp. The A and the F sharp are standard 12-tone tunings.
Breaking a lot of E strings.
Yeah.
I had to get a smaller gauge actually. I did break 2 of them, and then I got a smaller gauge and it worked.
If you're talking about, I mean, the 5/25 cent fourth is the native, is the best approximation in 16. So in ups and downs, it's just E, A, D, G, C, F.
I was notating it in eighth tones.
Oh, well,
so that's probably different from what you were doing.
Yeah, so I said I wouldn't do it that way. Cool, that makes sense now. Eighth tones.
Yeah, would you notate 16 using Movilla tuning?
No.
What would you notate it with?
Oh, yeah, no, I suppose, you have a good one. I use a native fifth, and then you're right, then the major thirds end up being smaller than the minor thirds, so that's kind of weird, so, alright.
Yes, I think that could be mighty confusing. It could be helpful in some contexts,
There's a
maybe.
big discussion to be had there, I see, both ways there, so, sorry, correct that.
Cool. Alright, our next one is John Jansen's, harmonic guitar, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, so show us how the harmonic guitar works.
Sure. So this instrument is called a harmonics guitar. It was invented by Glenn Branca in the early 80s. It's essentially just strings on a 2x4. But what kind of makes it do what it does is there's a middle bridge that divides the string into 2 half strings, and there's a pickup on one side. So it's called the third bridge system. It's a way of isolating string partials through sympathetic resonance. So one thing that it does really well is sort of creates these showers of harmonics. Other things it can do are sort of building up layers of sound. You can pick one specific partial and sort of build up a resonance that way. So you're sort of playing resonance more than you're playing a string. And notice if you can't see this, but if I mute the playing side, I don't actually mute the sound. just because of that sympathetic resonance.
Right.
Yes, very cool. And would you like to also play the duo guitar a little bit?
Sure. So this is called the duo chord. It's a very similar instrument. It's also a third bridge instrument. It's 8 feet long versus 6 feet long. I found I got more activity in the upper partials by having a longer string. So this is just the sound of the open string. Sort of stacking effect or layering, where you sort of continue to build up sound, sort of like if you have a pedal on a piano down all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. And we've also got Hans with his violin here. Yeah. Do you want to play like a microtonal scale, or explain how the violin is tuned?
What is a violin? Generally, you can do a lot of different scoratura. So for every microtonal scale, for every EDO, you can think about the individual scoratura. But of course, I used to play in Bohlen-Pierce, and for that I have tuned the fifths a little bit higher, quite much higher, 732 cents. That means 32 cents higher, like normally 12 to tempered fifth. So the open strings sounds really weird, but it is the so-called Wolf interval in the system. So normally, if you use Bohlen-Pierce in the inherent harmonic system, then you avoid the fifths, avoid also the octaves.
Can you play a sonority from Bohlen-Pierce?
Yeah, of course. The main chord is a chord that has the frequency ratio 3 by 5 by 7, and if you continue as by 9, what is 9 by 3 is the tritave, the 12th, the octave plus fifth, what is the period interval. Major 6. I continue with a tritone, but should be around 7 by 5. It's not exactly because it is tuned in equal tempered Bohlen-Pierce. And then the tritave. And of course I can continue. Next major 6. Things like that, but the quotation mark chromatical scale in Bohlen-Pierce sounds like this. So for every each single finger, and a lot of people, including me, are loving the so-called lambda scale, what is 9 out of 13 pitches. It has big step and small step, 2 1 1 2 1 2 1 2 1. The 2 step sounds like a minor, so 1 Bohlen-Pierce step is a neutral second. So and I play the lambda scala.
For now, let's hear from Clem and his pedal thing.
Pedal steel guitar, which is kind of a normal instrument, completely unmodified other than the setup, which is how it's tuned and how the pedals are set up. This particular one is a Harlan multi-chord, made in the 50s, and it's kind of one of the early pedal steels, and it's very flexible. I can just by turning these screws, I can change what pedals do what. It has 8 strings and 6 pedals on this particular model, and I generally might of course you could do any tuning whatsoever, but I normally tune it in just intonation, just to a C major. And with the pedals, I can change it to minor or to other chords, or I have a harmonic 7 pedal set up. I have a 9th pedal. Just 11. So I can get the whole very part tetrad or hexad. But I haven't even used the slide yet, so with this big cylinder of metal, I can. So, wow. Enharmonic. Right out of the box.
Beautiful. What would it sound like if you played couples therapy with all the 11th harmonics in them?
Oh, whoa, whoa.
tree frogs. It's great.
Is that, what are you doing that's unusual exactly for that instrument? Because you're saying that most of what...
Oh, how's the setup different?
Setup is
You know,
normal.
I don't. I mean,
Or is it-
You're changing the tuning of the pedals, right?
yeah. I changed. Well, I also changed the gauges of the strings and the open tuning. There's really dozens of different tunings, but there's a couple kind of standard ones called C6 and E9 tunings. The real pedal steel players, which I don't know how to play this thing, country western normal style whatsoever. But as to what the pedals do on this early an instrument like a Harlan multi-chord, it's designed so you hit one pedal and it just changes the whole chord. But generally you get more than a chord out of it. Usually it's set up so you got a 6 or 7 chord and you can selectively play certain notes to get, to play melodies. It's more of a melody instrument than a chord instrument traditionally. And it's also traditionally played with finger picks, which I've not been able to get used to. So I occasionally use a pick, but typically my fingers.
Very cool. Sounds beautiful. And for our last instrument, we'll have Doug on the other bot.
I really feel like I should turn this one over to Jacob, the co-inventor of the instrument. He'll be far better suited to demonstrate its awesome capabilities.
Actually, I totally lied about this being the last instrument. We also do have one more afterwards.
Yeah, save the best for last.
Yeah, save the best for last. It's a surprise.
Well, the other bot is old news by now. Invented in 2005, right here at Gesundheit. It is the bot refers to a bottomless bottle, which has been cut off in some manner.
It's not a
and
robot.
the other refers to the appearance, which is the glove hanging down from said bot.
Ooh.
A 4+ octave glissando was achieved. Anyway, and it's quite nice. Make your own utterbot, or I will sell you one on Etsy.
You heard him. Great. Okay, and now we've saved the absolute best for last. Gareth Hearne presents.
This is a broom, and I found it seeing how to do the improv, but it's actually a xenharmonic instrument, and I'll demonstrate that. So what I'm doing here is creating a fiddle on the open end of the broom. You can do it on any pipe by putting my finger across and blowing air diagonally across, and then by varying the air pressure, I change the resonance in terms of which harmonic is resonating in the tube. And since this is a closed pipe, because the broom is closed on the other end, we hear the odd harmonics only.
You can hear the harmonics.
That don't sound harmonic to me.
Well, they're just the odd harmonics. So like it's just the odd ones.
I guess we better harmonize the broom.
If I go low enough, it'll
Bohlen-Pierce.
sound like Bohlen-Pierce. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. This is secretly a Bohlen-Pierce broom.
It is.
In your microtonal closet.
Speaking of Bohlen-Pierce, what about these?
So this is the prototype. First of all, you see here's an end glued back.
Oh, I'm talking about these holes. You don't come.
No,
They're glued shut.
They are
Turn it
glued.
sideways.
Yeah, because then it's better on the other side. I cannot do it on the opposite side because there is the thumb hole is very close to the original hole.
Oh,
so,
yes.
And then I turned it a quarter around, and because here the upper part of the recorder you can turn as you want, and then I turn the upper part. The labium is in the
windway.
The windway is aligned exactly to the new holes, and then I can play. So this is the first register, and then we have to do some...
Wow, that really sounded like an octave to me. What is wrong with me? Can you play that again?
It's a Bohlen-Pierce
Oh, it's a false octave, yeah.
Okay. It even depends how strong you blow, and then the pitch change, maybe that is not so much. Bohlen-Pierce octave. I think it is.
Oh, I hear it. it now. Yeah, the loudness of the dynamic almost affects the pitch perception. But yeah, as he plays, listen to how the higher note is just a little bit under. Probably talk about like what stuff for like the camp next year and where we can find you on social media.
Follow us on
UnTwelve on Instagram.
Yes.
So
forward.
ideally, so last year we started planning things in like January, which was way too late. Actually, surprisingly, we had all of these new people join us, which was awesome. So I don't know, maybe we should just keep being really late, but. We were also thinking we should maybe try to start earlier the planning, so maybe like in September or something start.
You should start planning right now.
Yeah, I would actually like to mention a couple possibilities. So people like John Jensen this year brought his own instruments that he's built, but we haven't had any like workshops where everybody builds their own instrument and that sort of thing. So that could be something we could do. Last year we had Xenharmonic Adventures Festival in Bellingham, Washington, and that was really more of a series of concerts with a few lecture presentation sessions, and that was great. I mean, it was a great. I think it was a totally different vibe from what we did this year. Another possibility is to expand the length of the camp and do, for example, different modules. So maybe like a beginner Zen theory module. Maybe we spend a week like intensively studying all the basics, and then maybe like there could be a advanced nerd out module where where people can really, like for example, Gareth had a paper today and he had to spend a lot of time explaining the basics, but in this situation we already have a week of basics, and then we have another week of advanced theory where you can just totally nerd out and go crazy.
That'd be cool. It might be like
with fellow geeks, and
yeah.
And then we have similar to this year, we have a module maybe with recording compositions, and maybe another one that would be like a performance showcase. So that's kind of an ambitious idea. I don't know whether it'll happen all at once or right away next year, but those are some of the possibilities that we.
If anyone listening to this podcast has ideas or resources or institutions that might want to partner with us, get in touch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or if you just want to come.
And we will put out an official call. Because we don't necessarily need to do it at Gesundheit next year when they want to move around, and we welcome hosts for that. yeah, I have a few ideas for that, but I'll just they're just ideas, so I'm not going to mention them right now, but at least not in public.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure to have you all on and a pleasure to come to camp. So, awesome.
Thanks, Steve.